When I was in the process of making my last video, I sat down and took the time to watch a little series called Vinland Saga. Admittedly, I didn't really expect a whole lot from it when I started watching. For one thing, these days I go out of my way to avoid giving into hype. I've seen what people get excited about, I'm not falling victim for any of that. More than that, I've really never been into Vikings as historical people. When it comes to things like that, I've really been more into knights or cowboys over the years. Plus, whenever Assassin's Creed makes a game about a certain historical era, that whole era becomes a lot less cool as a result.
I dislike you with great intensity.
So the whole Viking hype wave that I assume got kicked off by the TV show Vikings really just passed me by when it happened. And now I'm goddamn mad about it because Vinland Saga turned out to be the best damn show about violence and the nature of revenge that I've ever seen. Set during the 11th century, Vinland Saga follows Thorfinn, a Viking boy who has the misfortune of watching his father get riddled by like 1,000,000,000,000 billion arrows by a gang of pirates. For some inexplicable reason, getting turned into a human pincushion ends up killing Thorfinn's dad, and as a result, Thorfinn swears vengeance on the man who orchestrated his death. Askeladd. A man who comes across as pretty cool and badass for large portions of the story, but then on occasion he does something really fucked up to remind you that he's a terrible pirate. Also, he looks like Green Arrow for some reason. Thorfinn ends up joining up with Askeladd's crew in a desperate bid to get close to the man, and spends much of his youth going around with his crew, killing people and getting involved in all kinds of wacky shenanigans. I'm particularly fond of the episode where the Askeladd gang plays a rousing game of Murder the Village.
We do a little trolling, it's called We Do a Little Trolling.
From here on out there's going to be spoilers for Vinland Saga, particularly the first season, so don't come crying to me if you end up getting spoiled. As mentioned earlier, a large portion of Vinland Saga's first season is focused around Thorfinn's quest for revenge, which did initially leave me a little bit skeptical of the series. Revenge is one of the most common story themes out there, being as old as mythology. Just from me saying that, you're probably already thinking up a few different examples in your head, but due to how common revenge is as a motif, how well it's done tends to vary wildly from story to story. On the one hand, you do have stories that don't try to overcomplicate matters, things like the classic Death Wish movies, vigilante stories where bad guys do something bad and the good guy goes after them in a violent rampage and gets them all to pay for what they've done. Stories like that go with the basic idea that revenge is cool and based, actually. If nothing else, they don't try to overcomplicate or muddy the message. They're basic, sure, but at the very least they're consistent with their messaging. The same can be said with the other school of thought when it comes to revenge stories, the revenge bad school of storytelling. For every straightforward story there is of a character seeking to avenge a wrongdoing that was committed unto them, there are just as many, if not more, preaching that revenge is a terrible and evil thing to go after, or pointless to pursue. The majority of revenge bad stories I've ever seen had a tendency to suck out loud, and there's usually some really weird morality going on with them that rubs me the wrong way. I'm sure you've all seen at least one story where a character is about to get their revenge only for another character to say, "No, you can't kill them, because if you kill them, you'll be as bad as they are." It's like saying, "No, you can't kill Hitler, because if you kill Hitler, you'll be as bad as he is." Like what the fuck are you talking about?
Why should I believe you? You're Hitler! No! Eva Braun, help me!
Or the other big classic revenge bad blunder, the character deciding at the 11th hour that they won't kill the person they were trying to get revenge on because, for whatever reason, they suddenly think it would be bad to do so morally. But killing all the henchmen and minions to get to this point, well, that was just A-okay. Did you want to try writing a second draft of your story, Naughty Dog? So, I was kind of worried that Vinland Saga would go down a similar route, but does it?
Not this time. No, not this time. It's totally made up. Pure fiction.
First and foremost, Vinland Saga places great emphasis on violence as a theme and focuses on it in a way that's a lot more grounded and mature than most other anime, or really most media. Whenever we think of violence in movies and sex on TV, we do so in a way that sees it as gratuitous and exciting. And there's nothing really wrong with that, it is fiction after all. But have you ever taken a step back from something like, say, an action movie and thought to yourself, boy, this would actually be kind of fucked up if it happened in real life? Well, that's the kind of approach Vinland Saga takes toward violence. Really, that much becomes obvious in the very first scene of the show where Thorfinn's dad, Thors, is going through a violent, bloody battle and just absolutely tearing people to shreds, but he feels no joy in doing so and actually grows more and more disgusted with himself as the fight goes on. Right off the bat, Vinland Saga treats violence with a great sense of weight and importance. It's not just superfluous. Characters in the story who are familiar with it understand how devastating it can be, and those who are naive to that fact, going in expecting it to be fun and games, they're just seen as foolish. It's also worth pointing out that the only characters in Vinland Saga who actually enjoy violence are portrayed as insane maniacs that everyone is afraid of. Ah, finally, my kind of people. So, even early on in the series, we understand that Thorfinn's quest for revenge isn't going to be something glorious or exciting, it's going to be terrible and traumatizing. And the early parts of Vinland Saga first season hammer that in even further with all the terrible things Thorfinn has to do in order to get close to Askeladd. These people he's killing, they aren't just faceless NPCs, they're actual people in Thorfinn's eyes, and as the series progresses it becomes apparent that hurting them is really starting to weigh on his mind. Notably, killing Askeladd is never really presented as if it would be a bad thing to do morally. For as charming and badass as Askeladd can be at times, the series has enough intelligence to occasionally pull back and have him do something awful, just to remind you that he's a terrible pirate. There's certainly an argument to be made that if Thors had been willing to swallow his morals and kill Askeladd during their duel, it likely would have saved a lot of lives in the long term. So, fortunately, Vinland Saga is smart enough to avoid the pitfall of saying, ooh, if you kill this guy you'll be as bad as he is, and all sorts of similar moral hand-wringing bullshit. Instead, the series seems to ask, to what extreme lengths are you willing to go to in order to get your revenge, and what kind of effect will these actions have on you in the long term? I mean, compare Thorfinn from episode 1 to Thorfinn from episode 10 and you'll have a pretty good idea of what I mean. The kid is aging worse than I am.
Honestly, when I'm walking down the street, no one's ever like, hey, look at that man. I think they're just like, whoa, that tall child looks terrible.
But how does Thorfinn's quest for revenge end up getting resolved? Well, this is a kind of major thing for Vinland Saga's entire story, certainly for the first season, and this is your last chance to jump off if you don't want to get spoiled. The simple fact of the matter is that it doesn't. Thorfinn's revenge essentially gets stolen from him and he doesn't get to kill Askeladd at all. Instead, Askeladd ends up getting shanked like an Elden Ring player for events far greater than Thorfinn's mere revenge quest. Thorfinn doesn't get his revenge, nor any sense of catharsis or closure. That's all robbed from him. Instead, he's left fully aware that he scarred himself for life and wasted his entire childhood over, basically, nothing. In revenge stories, it's very rare for the story to ask, what is this character going to do when the target of their revenge is dead? And in Season 2 of Vinland Saga, it's very clear Thorfinn hasn't thought that far ahead either. Thorfinn spent so long trying to define himself with his quest for revenge against Askeladd that once Askeladd was out of the picture, he really didn't have any way to define himself at all. I don't know, man. Have you considered taking up Funko Pop collecting?
This is the worst day of my life.
I've heard people complain about Vinland Saga's second season, proclaiming it to be boring or wishing that Thorfinn would go back to his old murderous ways. I don't want to get pretentious about this kind of thing, but I feel like if that's the kind of show you want to watch, you're looking in the wrong place. While the action scenes in Vinland Saga are certainly amazing to watch, the series isn't exactly subtle about saying that violence is not a good thing. More than that, Thorfinn isn't Goku. He's never shown actively enjoying any of the violence he partakes in. I wouldn't blame someone if they found Season 2's pacing to be too dull or slow compared to the first season, but nothing about it conflicts with the tone or themes set forth in the first season of Vinland Saga. Wow, look at me go, waxing lyrical about themes. I'm on the fast track to becoming pretentious. It's unlikely that revenge stories will ever really go out of fashion. They're simply far too engrossing for that. But as time goes on, there will undoubtedly be plenty of writers who are not as smart as they think they are trying to reinvent the wheel when it comes to such stories. Still, anyone who's looking to try and tackle a revenge story from a different angle, I'd say Vinland Saga remains one of the best examples you can follow these days. And God knows I'm definitely hyped to see where Thorfinn's story develops from here.